you know, there's a generalization within every country where there's always grains of truth. We're a country of great faith, we're a country of strong values, and we were a country of strong values the day before we voted for marriage equality, and we are still that same country with the same values the day after we voted for marriage equality. And I think the other thing that people noticed was that this became something that can be joyful. Now, we had to have a plebiscite. Let's say this first at the very beginning. We had to. It was a referendum commitment. It was a constitutional amendment. There was no way around this. It would seem to me if you can avoid this, you should avoid this. If there's a way to do this by legislation and for Parliament to do the job that it was elected to do, then that would seem to be the best way to do it. If there's a way to spend $160 or $200 million on everything from services and hospitals to bicycle lanes, then let's think about that rather than on a vote that we don't really need to have. Poll after poll shows up on 2/3 of Australians are in favour of marriage equality. That has increased from about 35% 10 years ago. Now, that increase hasn't happened because a whole lot of Australians left and were replaced by another bunch of people. It has happened because people had conversations and have changed their mind. The people who would have grown up with a different language around lesbian and gay rights, a different language around lesbian and gay full stop, you know, and they made that journey. And most of the time, the great trigger for making that journey is human stories. When people see that this is just about someone who's getting on with their life, and that when they get married, nobody's going to be less married, and nobody's going to be more gay. That they're just going to all get on with their life as they did before. This isn't about some invisible law or philosophy. The Irish lesson and the Australian lesson is this is about real people who we know. It's about members of our family. It's about being able to engage about that and have those respectful conversations. So we have to understand it's our job to make the conversation easier, to make it joyful. We remember the government in Ireland who kept telling me the whole way through the campaign how much he was in favour of BLT equality. And he campaigned for 6 months for sandwiches. And that's okay, because that was his language. That was his understanding. Now, we can go, that's not right, and you've left out Q and I, but what does he know about that? That's our language. Conversations are joyful. But without them, no one changes. And conversations are also powerfully moving. You know, one of the stories that I always tell since I got here was about the woman who was in her late 80s, who answered the door and spoke of her late brother, who had gone to Melbourne when he was 17, 70 years earlier, to be made invisible, to do what so many lesbian and gay people have done over the years, to run away and hide and to be erased from history, to be of no value. Much more cruel than anything that can be said to us is for nothing to be said to us. And he had died several years earlier, and that woman went to vote that day, and she voted yes for her brother. And then she did what she did every day. She went to Mass. There's someone who's made a journey, someone who's got to the real human story that lies at the heart of this. Now, we don't know what process we're going to have to face here. We know what one we would prefer not to, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But whichever process it is, we still have to have these conversations. The culture has to change. The real transformative moment where people stop thinking about this as a what and start seeing it for what it is, a who. That this is about Margaret and John and Barry and Patrick, rather than philosophy, legality, and morality. You can be the engines. All of us need to be the engines. Because somewhere in Broken Hill, right now, or somewhere in Darwin, there's a young lesbian or a young man making the most beautiful of discoveries. The discovery that every other human being in Australia makes, whether you're lesbian, gay, or straight, of who they are and who they're going to fall in love with. And the tragedy at this moment is that as they make what should be that beautiful discovery, they also make that terrible realization that their aspirations can never be the same as their brothers and sisters or their work colleagues. And we have it within us to make sure that that's the last generation that ever has to experience that. And all of us will play a phenomenal role in it. And as long as we remind ourselves all the time that this is about real stories, real people, and that we're in the business of persuasion, rather than shouting at people, they will make that journey, and I'm convinced that together we'll achieve marriage equality.